talking. This is gonna be short. I'm trying to do a lot right now, but so introduced myself yesterday. Most of you know me as Simone Love. If you look at the video from yesterday, you'll find out who I am, who my parents are, my sibling. So in any case, here we go. So installment number 2. Born in 1971 to a man who was in the military and a woman who basically stayed home. And I don't know what she was doing, my mom, but it was apparent because basically when my dad came home from the army, he split. He was gone. But, you know, they always say, oh, black men don't stay in the home. And that's not true. They don't stay in the home because there's a reason. There's always 2 sides to every story. And so, you know, we'll talk about both sides of those stories. My mom hasn't given too much information. Actually, I haven't gotten any information from my mom about that story. So I think what I'll do is, no, I'm not going to call her because I haven't talked to her in forever. She calls me every now and again, and, you know, conversations are very short and to the point. For those of you who are seeing me, hearing me for the first time, you'll find out why that is soon enough. But actually, if you go look at my Facebook page and you go back far enough, you can very well find out why that is. I don't hate her, I don't dislike her, you know, nothing like that. I just love me, and I am actively loving me. And in loving yourself, no one hurts themselves on purpose. So if you wouldn't hurt yourself on purpose, don't allow yourself to be hurt on purpose. Anyways, so I was born in 1971, lived on 52nd Street. My early childhood, I was probably 3 or 4, you know, that age where young mothers tend to drop their kids off to whoever the fuck is available. Well, yeah, that's what I remember. And I would always end up at the Mexican lady's house down the street. Now, I will say this. My mom had some Mexican friends when we were younger, and this is my first exposure to guacamole. And from as far as I can remember, I would be in the kitchen. We'll just call her Lupe, because I don't know what the hell her name was. So we were in Lupe's kitchen, and I am a child who has always paid acute attention to everything. I don't forget shit. Oh shit, hold on y'all, this car is doing like 120. I'm doing like 100. Let me get out of his way. Okay, so in Lupe's kitchen, I'm watching her, and I have to be about 4 or 5 years old, but I remember this. This is how far back I remember. Actually, I remember a lot further than this. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So in Lupe's kitchen, I see Lupe put the lard in the pan. Then Lupe puts the green chilies in the pan. Then Lupe puts the onions in the pan. And then Lupe puts room temperature. Like, this is what I remember. Room temperature cubes of beef in the oil. And she fries it all up together. And then right when the meat is browned, and it should not be a lot of liquid. That's what she was saying. Shouldn't be any liquid. Oh wow, check that out, you guys. What do you think that's about? Is that on the news? Hopefully nobody jumped. Wow, there's a lot of police officers up there. Wow, did you see that? That's pretty cool. Life in California, huh? Nobody gets away. Did you guys see those drones? Anyways, I digress. So there should be no liquid in the pan, and Lupe would then put a bay leaf in the oil with the beef, with the onions, with the green chilies. And then after it was all browned and cooked, the bay leaf would turn from a green color to like a woodsy brown color. I guess all the flavors are now in the oil. So what Lupe would do at that point is she would put more onion in. Yes, more onion. Then she would put the bell pepper in. And then she would pour the El Patio red sauce in. And then she would add water, a little bit of salt, bring it to a boil, and then as soon as it starts boiling, she would clean the pot. And that's just that blood, the foamy blood that rises to the top of the pot. She would remove it and then discard it on a paper towel, and then she would let it boil a little more, so it would reduce by a quarter in the pot. I know some of you are like, what does it have to do with your life? Well, these are my memories, and you'll explain. I mean, you'll realize why I'm giving you this story. Hopefully, you'll realize why this story is pertinent to my life. So, what I didn't know Lupe was making was the stew beef meat for burritos. So she would boil this meat on high until about 1 inch of the water was gone. I didn't know it was 1 inch at the time. I just recognized where the line of demarcation, that's what we call it, where the water was at when it started boiling versus where the water is when she turns it down low and puts a lid on it. So then she simmers this meat for the next 2 hours. After she simmers it for 2 hours, she doesn't take the lid off. She just kind of makes it so that the liquid can start to evaporate. So now, by the time it's all said and done, there's only enough liquid to cover however much meat is in the pan. And there you have, what do you call it? Stew beef for burritos. Mexican stew beef burritos. Amazing. These suckers taste so good. And all she did was she made tortillas, but I didn't see her make the tortillas. I missed out. So she made homemade tortillas, and I just remember seeing them like on the griddle. And then she would smear guacamole, and then she would put the meat on there, put some cilantro, and she would put some onion on there, and give me a little teeny tiny burrito, and I would just be holding it. Now I will tell you this, I don't know about the Mexican babies, but that shit was so damn hot, but you couldn't stop eating it because the flavor was amazing. Hot as hell, amazing flavor. I'm in Chino and it smells like ass. Anyways, so I remember this, 4 or 5 years old. And at this particular lady's house, I don't remember what her daughter's name was. We'll just give her a name. We'll call her Tiffany. She's a Mexican girl, but we still gonna call her Tiffany. So Tiffany and I used to play on the side of the house. How many of you know about those great big old 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s ice boxes? The kind that once they close and lock, that is it. There is no open that booger. Well, me and this little girl Tiffany would play hide and seek in the ice box. And when I think back to being 4 or 5 years old and being let out the house to play on your own accord, is kind of scary to me. Because first off, how tall is a 4 or 5 year old? And didn't you just start talking like yesterday? So we're outside playing, everything is cement. You know, they had disattached garages, and the ice box was on the side of the house. So Tiffany would get in. Now remember, we're 5 years old. Tiffany would get in this ice box, which was not on. It was just sitting on the side of the house. And she would close it. I would then come, pull that latch. 5 years old, remember. Pull that latch, open it, and be like, gotcha. And she would come out. We would run around and play. I would get in the ice box. Tiffany would come and pull the latch and tell me same thing, gotcha. And then we would go laughing, running around. And then at some point, I think I call her mom Lupe. Lupe would come outside and check on us. And you know, see that we're still running around. And I'm thinking she's coming to check on us to see what? If we're still running around? And that just seems so ass backwards to me as a parent. So instead of being outside to watch us run around, parents back then would come out to check to see if the kids were still running around. As opposed to what? Being kidnapped? Opposed to what? Running away somewhere? So you're checking on us, and it's so weird as adults. Oh, let me go check on my beans. Well, we know the beans aren't going to get up and walk away, right? The beans are going to be on the stove cooking when you go back to go check on them. But children, on the other hand, and we're talking about the early 70s. So if I'm 5, it's probably like 76. 76. So she's coming to check on us to see if we're still running around, as opposed to not being there because somebody took us. I don't know. Or not being there because maybe both of us got into that goddamn freezer together. Can you imagine? If the both of us decided it was not feasible for the other one to get in without the other one, I would not be here talking to you today. That's my point in this. So I remember cooking burritos. Look at this. Oh, that's the cops. I remember cooking burritos at 5 or 6 years old with Lupe's mama, and getting into an icebox with Lupe's daughter. But because both of us played nice together and took turns, because we were nice little girls taking turns, we both lived. I don't know if she's still living. I don't know what she looks like, but I know I'm still here. We both lived to tell our stories. And I say our stories because I'm sure she's talked to someone about the icebox too. Well, if we were selfish little girls and insisted on competing with one another and getting into the icebox together, there would have been 2 funerals on 52nd Street. Why? Because 2 little girls got into the icebox together. So, the reason I'm telling you this story is because I just gave you a falsity. The falsity is that we both survived to tell our stories. That is not true. Only one of us survived to tell our stories. That little girl, Tiffany, died in that icebox the next week. They found her dead inside that icebox, 7 houses from the house that I lived in. I no longer had a friend to play with. And to think, my mom dropped me off at this bitch's house. Excuse my language. I'm upset as I go through my life and I think about how careless we are. I say we. I'm included. I don't have any kids, but I've kept many kids. And I can only dissect my behaviors in keeping other people's children. So Lupe would come check on us to make sure we were still running around, but we were locking ourselves into an icebox we had no clue we couldn't get out of. And if one of us wasn't strong enough to open it, or let's just say if one of us was like Fernando the Bull, where one of us got in and then the other one just felt like, well, she wants to be in there, so I'll just leave her in there. Well, one of us would be dead and the other one would be locked in. One would be locked in and dead while the other one is just off playing. And then Lupe comes out in horror and says, where's whoever is missing? Oh, she's in the icebox. No big deal. And so I never asked this question until now, but was anybody playing with Tiffany when she locked herself into the icebox? And if they did, how did they feel about that? Like, that's some horrible shit to have to be the person who didn't open the door for your friend, not knowing that she couldn't get out unless you opened the door. And if someone didn't know that she was in there, they couldn't get her out in time. I can't remember how long it takes to suffocate without air, but you remember how big and bulky those refrigerators are, but they weren't that big, so there wasn't that much air in there, if any air. And that's a horrible death, is to suffocate, you guys. So that's just one of those things where, as parents, young or old, oftentimes we're desperate for child care, daycare, some kind of care. But let's just tell the truth in the matter. Oftentimes we drop our kids off to go do what? We don't need to answer that question. But really? And then you drop your kids off with anybody so you can go do what? We'll need to answer that question either. But anybody who was willing to keep your kids that you perceived as being decent. Why? Because they have kids. Well, people are careless with their own and with yours. So yes, Tiffany passed away in the icebox, and her passing created the law where you cannot have an old icebox with the door on it outside. And now I believe that you're not allowed to have an icebox outside at all. But my friend, and I don't remember her name, we're just calling her Tiffany, that happened to her. Now, by the time I was 5 years old, I had already lost a friend, and I was very aware of her death. What does that do to a 5-year-old? This is one of my earliest memories, is the death of a playmate. And I also realized at that time that I was in that same icebox. I remember when they told me she died in the icebox, and I was like, I was in that icebox too. I didn't die. That's because Tiffany let me out really quickly. So if our game of hide and seek would have went too long, but we couldn't wait to see the other one's face when we said, gotcha. So I'm still here. She's not, but I am. And wow, these people are really going fast. Check them out. So, next story from this same age, where you go to preschool when you're about 5 or 6 years old, right? That's when you go to Head Start or preschool, 5, 6. So I started going to preschool, and many of you who have lived in the 50s, meaning 49th, 50th, 48th, 52nd, a lot of these streets had signal lights. And even for the 70s, Hoover was considered a very busy street. So ingeniously, somebody in Civil Works in LA built underground tunnels so no one has to cross the street and get hit by cars. But I truly believe that it was probably because of the rail cars. That's what I'm thinking of right now. So they had crossways that were underground. So now I have a new playmate. We'll call her Stephanie. So this playmate, Stephanie, we went to preschool together. And they would walk us to the east side of the underground tunnel. Tiffany and I would walk down the stairs, smell like piss. We would walk down the stairs, and then we would walk through the underground tunnel, and then we would come up the stairs on the other side, and then we would walk into the preschool. Isn't that crazy? Simple, right? No problem? Alright. We did that for the entire school year. Well, we would come home and we would play. She lived so the first girl was Tiffany. She lived about 4 or 5 doors from Tiffany. And I would play at her house, another person's house that I was left at. till my mom came and got me. All right. I don't even remember what her mom looked like or anything. But I guess you can figure, of course, I'm going to remember Tiffany's mama with those good old burritos. Who would forget her? So, Stephanie's house, I remember it was a big arch at her house. That's what I remember. It was a big arch. And that was I think it's called the ficus tree. They grow two together and it just grew tall, but it was a big arch. So anyways, one day I was supposed to go over there and my mom told me I couldn't go. And I was wondering why. And then she told me because she was killed on the underground walkway. So to this day, those underground walkways are locked. And because my friend, the second playmate I ever had, was raped and murdered in those underground pathways right at 52nd and Hoover. Now, that's some crazy, crazy, crazy stuff. By the time I was 7, I had already lost 2 friends. Both tragically. And I'm thinking, what if there was some guy underneath the pathway waiting for the both of us? We're like 6 years old. What could we do? You know? People kill people. People rape. You know, she was raped and killed. So whoever killed her, raped her right there in the tunnel. And then killed her right there. Left her there. Then they put locks on all the underground tunnels. Nobody could cross the street underground anymore. It's the early 70s, like 77, 76. That had to be like 77. You can look it up. Look it up. Look it up, buddy. Those underground tunnels, I remember. Anyways, I'm just sharing a little story. I know it's coming up on midnight. By the time I post this, it'll be the 3rd already. So that looks like that's how it's going to be. I'll make a video last hour of the day just so I can kind of, you know, have enough time to have my thoughts. I'm winding down, about to be home in a minute, and be able to share my life. This portion of my sharing isn't necessarily for any particular reason. I'm sharing with you what I've gone through. And already, before the age of 7, I've experienced death. And close death. Like, these were close girls that I played with. And the sad thing about this is I could have been a victim, like either one of them. And just in case you didn't catch this part, remember I told you we went to school together? Well, this particular day that Stephanie went to school, I don't know the true story. This is just my theory. How is it possible for her to be raped and murdered and left in that tunnel if the person who was walking us to school walked her to the tunnel and waited for her to come out the other side? Think about it. What do you think happened? Did you know that most victims who are raped and murdered are only murdered because the person who raped them are very close and they know them? Something to think about. I share these type of stories because as mothers, we need to be vigilant. A lot of us are naive and we don't have this type of experience, so we don't think certain ways. And it's kind of like our innate sense of vigilancy in keeping watch over our young, we're distracted. We're distracted with phones. We're distracted with ding-a-ling. We're distracted with work. We're distracted with insecurities. We're distracted with trying to look better. We're distracted with trying to be a boss bitch, what they say. We're distracted with trying to, pursue our careers. We're distracted with all these things. And what we should be distracted with when we have infants, children, is a constant healthy fear of keeping them safe in all ways. Now, I know a lot of women will disagree, and I say, of course you will. And I say, of course you will, because oftentimes our own selfish needs get in the way. And so because your own selfish needs won't allow you to feel guilty about not doing the most you can do, we settle for disagreeing. It's okay. You don't have to disagree. I can't agree to disagree with you. But when your sons and daughters are murdered, kidnapped, raped, molested, then you have to think about, where did I go wrong? What happened? Well, hell, that shit happens right underneath your nose. So, I'll leave you with that note. I'll pick up from this story tomorrow. Alright, ladies. This is Simone signing off. How I became the woman I am today.